Breaking news today on Sekulow as a judge dismisses the Jack Smith case against Trump.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, folks, welcome to Sekulow. Folks, a little bit of, I'm working with my microphone right now as I speak. I am in Milwaukee, of course, for the Republican National Convention, which kicks off today, and it's going to be a very different convention, of course, than we've seen in the past because of the horrors of what occurred just this weekend that the nation is still dealing with. But we're going to get to that and plenty of discussion on that today. Rick Rennell will be joining us as well to get into that. He'll be joining us at an ACLJ panel this week here in Milwaukee that we're working on with various delegations that we'll be talking about lawfare to. And where does lawfare lead? Well, lawfare can oftentimes lead to the next step, which is these kind of warfare acts of encouraging people to engage in acts of horrendous violence because of the way you've demonized your political opponents. But there is breaking, huge news out of the case. The classified documents case in Florida has been dismissed. All charges by Judge Aileen Cannon against Donald Trump have been dismissed for two reasons. One, that the special counsel was acting without congressional authority, that the Department of Justice cannot just appoint someone to be special counsel without having to go through the normal confirmation process like a U.S. attorney, even though a special counsel has more power than a U.S. attorney. So that was part one. But part two was the appropriations clause of Congress and, of course, of the Constitution. Where does this money coming from for this special counsel, and that not having to go through a normal approval process through Congress, signed by the president. So she's given a way for, if you want to have special counsels, this is what you need to do, and they need to be treated almost like super U.S. attorneys. Now, we will explain. My dad's going to be joining us in the next segment of the broadcast, what happens next. Now, as of now, these charges have been dropped, and remember, and I'll go to Logan and Will on this, and guys, remember, this case was already becoming a super disaster for Jack Smith.
That's right, Jordan. As you remember, there were many irregularities in this case, really from the beginning of it, whether it be the photo shoot that they did with the evidence that was released to the public very quickly. And then we find out that the top secret cover sheets were actually props brought by the FBI and the Department of Justice for that raid specifically. And then you find out the issues of mishandling of the evidence itself when the Trump legal defense team received the catalog of the discovery and the evidence. Things were missing, things were out of order. So it had been mismanaged as it went. But this was the big question, whether or not Judge Cannon would rule on the authority of the special counsel to even exist, to even bring these charges in the first place. In that oral argument, some of the readout that we saw was she very much honed in on that appropriations language where she asked repeatedly about where's your funding coming from, and they said we have unlimited budget. Well, what if that runs out? Well, then we'll go somewhere else. The government was very proud of the fact they could spend as much money as they wanted without recourse, and that violation of separation of powers when Congress has the power to appropriate those funds, and we see that she's ruled against on two different reasons to dismiss these charges.
That's right. We will be back in just a moment. If we want you to give us a call right now, phone lines are open, 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. Lines are open. Our dad's going to be joining us in the next segment, Rick Rennell, later on in the broadcast, and we have some news about how the ACLJ can get involved in a lot of the events that happened over the weekend. You want your voice heard on the air? Now's the time to do it. Also, we are at a pivotal time in the history of the ACLJ. You've heard about what we're doing. We're going to keep doing it, and we are redoubling our efforts to defend life and liberty, and that's why we launched our Life and Liberty Drive. Over halfway through Life and Liberty Drive for the month of July. You need to be a part of it right now. We're taking action to fight back, but we need your support to enable us to continue. So please donate. Help us defend your freedoms. Go to aclj.org. Make your tax-deductible gift. That is doubled for this month. And if you become an ACLJ champion, that'd be great too.
morning, everyone. We are coming on the air with breaking news about former President Donald Trump. NBC News has just learned that the federal classified documents case, the case where he's been accused of hoarding classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate, has just been dismissed by a federal judge in Florida. This news comes as Republicans are set to officially nominate him for president later this week, and less than 48 hours after he survived that assassination attempt on him at a rally in Pennsylvania.
The judge fully agreed with former President Trump's defense attorneys that the appointment of Special Counsel Jack Smith by Attorney General Merrick Garland was unconstitutional. They said only Congress should be allowed to authorize the appointment of someone of Smith's stature, and only Congress is allowed to authorize the funding for an investigation led by someone like Special Counsel Jack Smith. Judge Cannon writing in her decision, Diane, that Special Counsel Smith's prosecution of this action breaches two structural cornerstones of our constitutional scheme: the role of Congress in the appointment of constitutional officers and the role of Congress in authorizing expenditures by law.
Essentially, the bottom line here is that this documents case goes completely away for Donald Trump. There was a hearing that was originally scheduled for next week to talk more about this appointments issue. Judge Cannon issues this on the day of the beginning of the RNC. So right now, Donald Trump still has one pending case against him in federal court. That's here in Washington, D.C. That's his alleged attempts to try to overturn the 2020 election. Special Counsel Jack Smith received a blow to that case just a couple of weeks ago with the Supreme Court. That seems to be somewhat delayed right now. But this is big news. No question that this case is completely dismissed.
All right, so there is a lot of news to cover, folks. This is Gordon Sekulow. I'm coming to you from my hotel room in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the Republican National Convention, the ACLJ, and our team doing a lot of work here that kicks off this week. Of course, a bit of a different tone here in Milwaukee in light of what we all saw on a Saturday evening, if you were watching the news, and there's no way you don't know what happened. And we're going to talk about that more later on the broadcast and allow you to weigh in with experts on national security like Rick Grinnell, who's part of our team at the ACLJ. But I do want to go right to our chief counsel, Jay Sekulow, about this major decision out of Judge Cannon, the district court in Florida, Dad, it both invalidating the appointment of special counsels for two reasons. One, that they don't go through a confirmation process, and that two, so they haven't been, they don't have a process to go through. And two, there is no fund appropriation that Congress sets aside for special counsel. So they can spend unlimitedly as long as the DOJ wants to keep them moving. And so it's like we're not going to have these unchecked prosecutors that are super U.S. attorneys not have to go through this process in the United States of America. But I want to get your take, Dad, on one, the impact of the decision short term is that the charges were dropped against Donald Trump. The next step is, what does Jack Smith do on appeal?
Well, of course, he's going to appeal and it goes to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. But, this was the same argument that we raised 6 years ago when we were handling the Mueller investigation. We said that the appointment of Bob Mueller was unconstitutional, that exactly as Judge Cannon said, it violated the appointment clause because, as the Department of Justice likes to brag about these special counsels, they have more authority, or certainly the same amount of authority, but with greater, less oversight than a U.S. attorney. And of course, a U.S. attorney to be appointed has to be confirmed by the United States Senate, and the money for that U.S. attorney has to be approved by Congress. None of that happens with the special counsel. So this is an argument that we have raised historically since the Mueller investigation started that we were handling for President Trump. And we said that it was unconstitutional appointment, and we were ready to litigate it. Now, we never had to, because at the end of the day, when the report came out, as you know, there was not only no legal action taken, but the report vindicated the president as regards to the no obstruction and no Russian collusion. Having said all of that, the important part of what Judge Cannon says here is that the special counsel's position effectively usurps the important legislative authority, but also this is on page 67 of her opinion. She says the virtually unchecked powers given to the special counsel, to Special Counsel Smith under the special counsel regulations. And then she says, and this conclusion is great, since November of 2022, Special Counsel Smith has been exercising power that he did not lawfully possess. And then, of course, the case is dismissed. It goes to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. But let me also add that Justice Clarence Thomas, in the case involving the January 6th and the issue of presidential immunity, which was a big victory for President Trump, Justice Thomas, in his concurring opinion, said, hey, Jack Smith has no right to bring anything. He shouldn't be bringing any charges. It violates the appointment clause. So I think this is ultimately going to go to the Supreme Court if the president is not reelected. And I think the Supreme Court's going to say 6-3 or 5-4, no authority for Jack Smith. If Congress wants to fix it, go ahead and fix it, but not as it exists right now. So that I think Judge Cannon made the right decision. And this is obviously a significant victory for the former president.
Why do you think in the past, Dad, courts have been so wary when these challenges have been brought to so quickly dismiss these challenges? Is it because most of these judges come right out of the Department of Justice and it's been business as usual, so they don't want to rock the boat? I mean, we don't see it. It seems like we are on an overload of special counsels right now. Maybe that's the issue too, is that they were not, this has been something that only really came about because of the end of the independent counsel statute. So now we have the special counsel. So do you think it was just a matter of time, or do you think it's just because it's almost being abused against Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's at a point of utilization that we've never seen in U.S. history. There's no statutory basis for it. It violates the Constitution. We've been saying that for years. The courts that have ruled on it, and they act like there's been these, hundreds of courts that have ruled on it, frankly, got it wrong. And I think there is, Jordan, institutional bias. A lot of these judges come out of the Department of Justice, and there's this inclination that the agency is right and that the agency possesses this unlimited authority. And by the way, in light of the Chevron case, which was also decided this term by the Supreme Court, those days are over. And no longer do these agencies have free reign. So this was a double hit in a sense, and I think effectively ends this case, certainly before the election. It may end it completely altogether. And I think it's going to have an impact on the case in D.C. If I would file motions to dismiss immediately in Washington. Although that case has got so many problems, I don't know if Jack Smith's going to ever be able to bring it.
Yeah, I mean, they're still dealing with the outcomes of what happened with the Supreme Court case, presidential immunity, and the fact that they'd have to go back through, even if he legitimately was allowed to remain as special counsel, to go back through starting at like a district court level on, okay, what of these acts were actually official acts that could be criminal, what were unofficial acts, what were official acts that again, you can't question those and you can't bring those up as criminal just because you disagreed with the policy decision or the tone of speech that the former president may have used. But on this decision, again, we have seen time and time again, and Dad, we're doing a panel on lawfare this week here at the Republican National Convention. And unfortunately, I think what we've seen is the outcome of extreme lawfare played out this weekend. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
Horrible situation. Listen, the weaponization by the government, it doesn't help anything. And I think lowering the tone is really important right now as we've gone through these events of this weekend and the tragic loss of life in Pennsylvania and almost assassination, and certainly an assassination attempt on the former president. And I think we need to be praying for our country and praying for our nation. I think right now, the focus has to be on an election that's only basically 16 weeks away. And you've got a lot of turmoil right now. And we'll see we'll see the American people should be able to make this decision at the ballot box. This should be a vote, not through indictments, not through criminal cases. And I think this, what happened with Judge Cannon is emblematic of what's going on here. Jack Smith is notorious for overreach. I've been saying that on our broadcast for years. He's very good at bringing indictments and not so good at getting convictions or not getting things thrown out. And here, he lost the McDonald case. He lost 9-0 at the Supreme Court. 9-0. Not one justice thought he was right. And on the appointment, on the issue that just came up on the presidential immunity, it was 6-3. So, I mean, he's not carrying the weight here. He knows his whole his whole process is in tremendous jeopardy right now, and that's better for the American people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we do have a call. I want to take it real quick. Joanne in Ohio online, too. Joanne, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air. I wanted to get this question on Smith.
Hi, guys. Actually, you kind of answered part of it, or Jay did, but my other thing is shouldn't Chutkan or do they have to file a motion to dismiss on this grounds with Chutkan, or can she stay this whole thing so that Jack Smith can't continue to work on it at least?
A motion to dismiss the lawyers have to file a motion to dismiss. In other words, to get the court to issue an order like this, you'd file a motion to dismiss on the same grounds. Judge Chutkan is also dealing with the reality of trying to figure out this whole immunity issue. Look, the case in New York, the DA's case, is now fallen apart because the judge mistakenly let in testimony, which the Supreme Court said he could not, of officials within the White House to testify in the Trump trial there. So that case is going to get thrown out by the appellate division. And then you've got, and we're filing a brief in that, and then you've got a situation with Chutkan. Yeah, a motion has to be made. Clearly the motion has to be made, but I'm sure that's coming.
Yeah, I mean, Dad, we appreciate all of your insight. We are on this. And as you said, that ACLJ is getting involved or has been involved in many of these cases involving Jack Smith throughout this process. And we plan to, if necessary, continue to be involved at the American Center for Law and Justice, not just on behalf of President Trump, but here it's on behalf of the American people and the abuse of the Department of Justice and how we have seen it be weaponized, not just against leading presidential candidates, but also the American people, the whistleblowers that we support, going way back to the clients in our Tea Party cases that we had to represent. So, Dad, thanks for joining us. Logan, I know you wanted to talk to everybody as well.
That's right. We are in the middle of our ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. So right now, I'm going to encourage you to make your donations at aclj.org or scan the QR code on your screen if you're watching. We're going to continue this conversation, obviously, about the case being thrown out, but also the horrific events over the weekend. We're going to discuss what that means, and we're going to talk about that with Rick Grinnell and the rest of the ACLJ team coming up, and how we're going to get involved as well. But right now, I'm going to encourage you, if you can, if you enjoy this broadcast, if you enjoy the legal work we do, if you ever think you could be the person who's going to need us, I encourage you right now, donate today to help defend your freedoms. Go to aclj.org, and you can have your tax-deductible gift doubled right now. For this month, all donations are doubled. And if you're able, become an ACLJ champion, which means you're making a monthly recurring donation. Do that today. We have had ups and downs. We'd love to have more of you join us each and every month at the ACLJ. We'll be right back.
Donald Trump has arrived in Milwaukee to attend the Republican National Convention, where he'll be formally confirmed as his party's candidate for the presidential election in November. The former president said he considered delaying the trip after the attempt to assassinate him on Saturday, but he could not allow a shooter to force a change in his schedule.
Trump just now landing in Milwaukee with his wounds still fresh. As you see there, descending the plane, Trump said he felt the bullet ripping through his skin.
Something that said, take a look at what happened.
The president himself told an interviewer that he basically threw out this convention speech he planned to give Thursday night in favor of a different message.
I'd point you to President Trump's truth posting yesterday morning, where he said we need to be resilient in our faith, but also defiant in the face of wickedness. This is a moment in our country's history where we're in a tinderbox. There's so much political division. There's so many people who are hurting from the economic woes, that are hurting from the chaos at our southern border. You look at the families of Lake and Riley or Rachel Moore, and people have been impacted by this border invasion. We have to go and put our country in a different direction. We have to come together. Savannah, the disunity and the unrest that's happening at the national level just simply isn't good for the country. It cannot persist.
What is the speech going to be about now?
He said he was going to focus on bringing the country back together. He thought that it was very, very important that in that moment, when that happened to him, he understood this is what he wants to do, what he's supposed to do. He sounded incredibly upbeat. These moments have a way of changing people. Just 1 centimeter a difference, and we would have him be talking about a much, much different story today.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. This is Jordan Sekulow. As you can see, I am in a hotel room. This is behind me. If I open the windows in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the ACLJ has got, again, a good team here and presence at the Republican National Convention. Of course, a convention that is changing by the moment. We know that President Trump is here. Will likely make what is usually, if I've been involved in these in the past, they make it a kind of appearance on the first night or two of the convention. They don't usually make remarks, or if they do, it's a word or two, but they'll come out and kind of wave to the delegates as people kind of pour into Milwaukee to start filling up. But of course, what happened on Saturday evening, and the fact that we're even here today talking about not President Trump being nominated this week, I think, again, and I don't want to take away from the loss of life from that firefighter who was protecting his family at all. But when you have heard now from these experts on how close this shooter was and how easy of a shot this was, and it was literally because of the way President Trump had decided to turn his head, that the bullet went through his ear instead of something that could have been completely catastrophic. I mean, we're learning more each day about the incident and also about why 150 yards away wasn't being more secured by the Secret Service, and we're learning that it wasn't his usual Secret Service team. But guys, I mean, both Logan and Will, I mean, there is, I will tell you, there's a palpable difference on the ground in Wisconsin. One is because things are changing rapidly here, schedule-wise. I think President Trump came because that was starting to become too much of a story as well, and he wants it to kind of get back to of course, the themes of this week and the speakers that'll be here. But we already know there's some new speakers like Nikki Haley joining. So this kind of new unity effort inside the Republican Party, and I think in his speech it'll be to the entire country that we can disagree on issues, but we should never live in a country where we are just afraid. And we saw this last election, but on this election, it's even more so. You know, I used to always tell people, Logan, you know what, if you really want to get that vote out, don't be afraid to put the bumper sticker on your car. I mean, now, I mean, think about what just happened, and you have to rethink that seriously, especially if you've got young kids or a family or live in a city that might not be friendly to Republicans. Or there's just one guy in that city who might not be friendly to Republicans and decides to use you as a target. I mean, that is now not just some theory. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, there was an attempted assassination, and for the Republican nominee for president.
Absolutely. I think that is a concern everyone's going to have. But you did see sort of that unification happen over the weekend. You saw a lot of even the celebrities who are very liberal, very active Democrats come out and saying they were praying for President Trump and for the families of those that were lost. And of course, that tragic story that came out. It's just horrifying. It doesn't feel like the country we live in. Maybe there's a moment for unification right now. As you said, Donald Trump has already made a statement that he's kind of readjusting his whole speech to be more of unification. We do have some news that looks like that a VP will be announced imminently, probably in the next few hours. And there's definitely a leading candidate right now just due to some traction happening. But also, when you look at what happened on the weekend, even little things, Jordan, like you said, in Milwaukee, I'm sure things are changing. The Daily Show, Comedy Central's news show, they brought back Jon Stewart for it. They have pulled out of Milwaukee. They've decided they're not doing their show because they feel it's inappropriate. And the fact you even have a comedic group of the Daily Show saying, "Hey, we're going to take this back to New York. We're going to still do it in studio. We're not doing a show at all on Monday, and we're going to give this a little moment to breathe." I think you do have the resetting of America in some ways, hopefully towards that. Now, that's not to say that it's going to be smooth sailing from here to there, but the tone is going to change at least for the next few months. And whether that is from the fact that President Biden was able to get on the phone with President Trump, I think even says a lot.
Well, and I also think one of the biggest problems that we saw immediately was legacy media and the way that legacy media handled this. And whether it be the headlines like CNN saying Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally, or the Washington Post saying that Trump was escorted away after loud noises at Pennsylvania rally. NBC News, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after popping noises heard at his Pennsylvania rally. When everyone knew what it was, normally this is something that legacy media would love to write the most bombastic headline they could, but they treated this completely different because it was Trump, and you could tell that they were concerned about making him stronger. So they chose politics in this moment over reporting. And this is another interesting note. You talked about The Daily Show canceling their broadcasting at the RNC because they didn't feel it was appropriate. This morning, MSNBC canceled one of their biggest shows. Morning Joe was pulled from the air Monday morning. Just for today. They will go back on air tomorrow.
Celebrating too early.
Right. But they were pulled off air today, and they just continued news coverage because this is a quote given to CNN. A person familiar with the matter told CNN the decision was made to avoid a scenario in which one of the show's stable of 24+ guests might make an inappropriate comment on live television that could be used to assail the program and the network as a whole. MSNBC did not trust the folks on Morning Joe,
their panel,
to not make something inappropriate and to damage the reputation, the already stellar reputation of MSNBC, but they didn't trust Morning Joe to not make it worse. That should tell you everything you need to know about the state of the media today.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those comments we saw out of Benny Johnson, this is the Democrat congressman who co-led the January 6th investigation, right? And, of course, he also then proposed legislation that any presidential candidate that has been charged with a felony or convicted of a felony should lose their Secret Service protection. That would have been good if that had gotten through Congress, right? Because Donald Trump would have 100% been dead at that event, and a lot of other people as well. But, of course, then he fired a staffer for saying, I wish they had better aim, something like that. I mean, there is still, I know we call for this moment of unity, and we want to get to that point because, again, we should be able to have tough political battles in our country, but the battles should be words and ideas. They shouldn't be in the streets. They shouldn't be with guns. We are all Americans at the end of the day, and whether you like the president who gets elected or you don't, you have to respect the office and also respect the members, your fellow citizens who did vote for them. You can think they are totally wrong. You can constantly talk about that. But again, when they talk about bringing down the heat, I think they think, oh, well, this is really going to actually hit on Donald Trump. But it's their rhetoric. It was Joe Biden who said, let's put a target on Donald Trump. Let's put the target there. It has been his team that has used this rhetoric, comparing him to Hitler and the Nazis. And when you do that, and people who are not quite right in the head hear it, they think that they're doing something potentially heroic if you're stopping the next Adolf Hitler. I mean, which is what Democrats have gotten used to when they talk about Donald Trump. So I think here, Logan, you've got this unique opportunity for Republicans to really rise above where the Democrats have been playing in the mud.
I think you're right. I think there's a chance for the Republican Party to actually make a difference here, whether the Democrats will or not. They can actually be the ones. We may see a landslide victory. It's because of however this rolls out over the next few days. Let's watch it. Let's pay attention. We've got a second half hour coming up. If you don't join us live, you should. We broadcast each and every day, noon Eastern, by the way, for a full hour on ACLJ.org, YouTube, Rumble. Wherever you're listening right now, you can find us on those platforms and, of course, on ACLJ.org. We're going to take more calls coming up in the second half hour. Rick Grinnell's going to join us and support our work right now during the Life and Liberty Drive at ACLJ.org. All donations are doubled and matched.
Last summer, we launched our first ever ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. We never could have imagined how much you, our ACLJ members and ACLJ champions, would exceed our expectations, and we can't thank you enough. We'd love to tell you that 1 year later, threats to life and liberty are no more. Sadly, the radical left is relentlessly doing everything it can to destroy the very foundations of this great nation: life, religious liberty, and the Constitution. The good news is your ACLJ team has not slowed down. We continue to fight in courtrooms across the country, including the Supreme Court, to defend your freedoms and to save innocent babies. And we're proud to announce the return of the ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. Right now, your tax-deductible gift will be doubled, dollar for dollar, doubling your impact to defend your freedoms and help save innocent lives. Go to ACLJ.org right now and join us in this fight.
Keeping you informed and engaged. now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, okay, welcome back to Sekulow, folks. So, of course, two huge issues. You see, I'm not in the studio. I am in a hotel room in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, inside the security perimeter for the Republican National Convention, which kicks off later this evening. And, of course, there's kind of a build-up until the president, obviously, the vice presidential announcement, which we've been told could happen while we're on the air. We've got about a half hour left on our broadcast today. We'll see if that announcement occurs. If not, we will break it down if it does occur later in the day for you tomorrow, because I think even that announcement is kind of, and I'm not taking away from whoever that is, it's still a major decision and to be chosen to be a vice presidential candidate. But there's two huge issues for our ACLJ members. One that broke this morning, Judge Cannon. Remember, we talked about the challenge to the special counsel. Well, folks, just if you're just joining us, she has issued her order today. And she has ordered that the appointment of special counsels is illegal. It's not constitutional. It's not based off U.S. law because they are not confirmed statutorily. They don't go through even the process that a U.S. attorney with less jurisdiction has, and that they violate the appropriations clause of again, the Constitution and United States law, which requires that Congress fund these kind of offices in the United States. And yet these special counsels have basically an unlimited budget and an unlimited territory to do their work, except for they're somehow untouchable by Congress, who's supposed to have this key oversight role, mostly which is the key oversight role runs to the fact that they can decide whether or not to fund these individuals or not. So that is huge. Right now, the Florida classified documents case against President Trump has been dismissed on two grounds. One, that Jack Smith is that he is not appropriately have authority within that jurisdiction she found. And two, that the appropriations clause prevents it as well. So now we go to, though, the second biggest story, the biggest story probably, I was thinking, Logan, in my lifetime, things that I remember, not just that happened, but things I remember experiencing. 9/11 probably being number one. Maybe number two, the election of the first black president. Whether you like President Obama or not, kind of a historic moment in the United States for sure. And then watching on live television a former president running for president with the nomination, leading up to the week, just days before going to the convention, being shot while others lost their life on live television. It changes everything, and it takes a long time to recover from politically.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a shopping mall with my son, and Will called me and said, "You need to turn on the news." I was like, "Well, I can't right now where I am." And you could see it in real time start to spread. Everyone started talking around you. It was one of those few moments in history where you legitimately, all your ear, you could just hear different people saying, "Are you seeing what's happening? Are you hearing it?" And we were in a family fun center with my kids, and it showed up on all the TVs. And the family fun center, probably just to be safe, flipped it to other shows and other programming because they didn't want this like graphic blood images all over this kids' birthday parties. And in that moment, I told my son, who's he's getting close to a teenager, he's almost 12 years old. I told him, I was like, you may not want to see this footage, but when President Biden comes out or President Trump speaks, whatever it is, you want to make sure you're watching this to see this, because this is a moment you are never going to forget. And really, we shouldn't. We should always look back at this crazy moment that happened. Sadly, a moment that had been almost speculated would happen from every commentator as the heat has gotten hotter and hotter. And we saw that clips started playing of all of your top leading commentators kind of predicting this horrifying outcome. And now you obviously have situations where you're at the RNC. I'm sure the security is going to go wild now. Things are going to get crazy. But hopefully we can see this as a turning point for the country. That's what we're hoping for. That's what we're hoping and praying for. And you can be a part of that as well. This pivotal moment in American history. We are going to figure out how the ACLJ can get involved. We got a lot of ideas. We are working on them this morning. We are redoubling all of our efforts to defend you, defend life, and defend liberty. As we see what happens over the weekend, we cannot just stand back. Give us a call right now if you want to be on the air, 1-800-684-3110. Let's support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. Rick Grinnell joining us in just a moment.
Donald Trump has arrived in Milwaukee to attend the Republican National Convention, where he'll be formally confirmed as his party's candidate for the presidential election in November. The former president said he considered delaying the trip after the attempt to assassinate him on Saturday, but he could not allow a shooter to force a change in his schedule.
Trump just now landing in Milwaukee with his wounds still fresh. As you see there, descending the plane, Trump said he felt the bullet ripping through his skin.
Something that said, take a look at what happened.
The president himself told an interviewer that he basically threw out this convention speech he planned to give Thursday night in favor of a different message.
I'd point you to President Trump's truth posting yesterday morning, where he said we need to be resilient in our faith, but also defiant in the face of wickedness. This is a moment in our country's history where we're at a tinderbox. There's so much political division. There's so many people who are hurting from the economic woes, that are hurting from the chaos at our southern border. You look at the families of Lake and Riley or Rachel Moore, and people have been impacted by this border invasion. We have to go and put our country in a different direction. We have to come together. Savannah, the disunity and the unrest that's happening at the national level just simply isn't good for the country. It cannot persist.
What is the speech going to be about now?
He said he was going to focus on bringing the country back together. He thought that it was very, very important that in that moment, when that happened to him, he understood this is what he wants to do, what he's supposed to do. He sounded incredibly upbeat. These moments have a way of changing people. Just 1 centimeter a difference, and we would have him be talking about a much, much different story today.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. Folks, in the next segment of the broadcast, we will take a lot of your phone calls to a 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. You may notice my backdrop. Yes, it's a hotel room in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, here for the Republican National Convention. And I'm about to be joined by another member of the ACLJ team, Rick Rittenell, who is also in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for the Republican National Convention. And we're going to be doing a panel as well together with Rick. I want to make sure you all know that for some of the delegations tomorrow on lawfare. And wow, has that in a sense changed, because we were always concerned that the idea of lawfare takes you to the banana republic level. And then when you have what we saw on Saturday, though you can arise from this as a tougher and stronger individual like President Trump and nation long term, you can also spiral the other way. I mean, I think, again, I know we're waiting for Rick to connect, but Logan, that is the other concern, is that you spiral. There's only two options here. You take the high road as a country, which takes both the right and the left and the activists, including the most hardcore activists, saying we're going to take the high road, or you spiral because you've already gone through the process of prosecuting politicians because you don't like where they are on the issues, and now people are getting those politicians are being shot over.
Well, Jordan, one of the bigger problems, I think, as well, is that you've already seen that President Trump has announced he's changing the tone and the text of his speech that'll be delivered on Thursday. He's moving away from attacks on President Biden, and he's going to go more into the unity message. But what you've seen from the Democrats who are saying lower the temperature, that's all directed at Republicans and conservatives. It's not directed at their own base, who's been making everything from claims that President Trump staged this to horrific statements about, I wish the shooter was a better aim. They're not directing it. Even last night in his Oval Office address, he mainly focused on attacks that the right had done against the left, and therefore was trying to recapture a narrative, and that's what's really frustrating.
Rick is joining us. Rick Rittenell is joining us too. He's in Wisconsin as well. And Rick, I know you're going to be addressing the convention this week on Wednesday. Has your speech changed, Rick? I mean, has it changed kind of your thoughts on how you'll be making remarks throughout the week?
I think it did change a little bit. I adjusted somewhat. I'm sensitive to the fact that I'm going Wednesday, and by Wednesday, if everybody is just focused on the assassination attempt, then I think it would be too much. But there's no question that I think we have to adjust our thinking. Everything has changed. I think President Trump now views the race differently, and certainly I see it from my phone just lighting up from friends who are not that political saying, wow, I have to vote for Donald Trump now. So I think everything has changed.
Yeah. And yeah, I felt that right when I got here. I mean, I think that the whole substance, I know we're doing a panel tomorrow, and this is the fear of the panel long term was that when you go banana republic style, this is the kind of outcome that you get towards is political assassinations. But I do want to talk to you about the way the media kind of reacted initially. I mean, we had shows canceled this morning, Rick, on MSNBC because they were too worried about what their guests may say.
Look, I've been very critical of Comcast. Comcast owns MSNBC and NBC. The Comcast executives need to do more to tone down all of this incredible hate. And they've had people calling Donald Trump Hitler. And the natural extension of calling someone Hitler is that Hitler should be removed. And so they have a responsibility. Comcast has a responsibility. And I know a lot of people listening to us, a lot of people in our ACLJ family purchased Comcast as their provider. And they need to understand that Comcast owns what happens on Morning Joe. Comcast owns what happens on Joy Reid's show. Comcast owns what happens on Rachel Maddow's show. And unless we're going to have a better debate where there's dissenting views, calm views, and not just one-sided radical views, I think Comcast has got a problem.
Yeah. Well, I think, Rick, one of the other issues I wanted to talk to you about, though, is generally the security. It looks like we've now got news that there is going to be a full investigation by Congress. It's hard for me to imagine that we're going to get all the information that we would need to about why this was able to occur. And there's a lot of questions people have. I mean, how close this shooter got. You attend a lot of these events. We've all been to a lot of political rallies before. We've worked, if you've worked on campaigns like Rick or me, you've worked with the Secret Service advance teams who are looking at all these different angles and doing their job and very forceful of, no, we need to do it this way. We need to bring the person in that way. And we can't have this open or that open. And yet in this event, it's almost was shocking to people that they were spotting out the shooter before law enforcement, including the Secret Service.
Look, I've been around long enough to know that one thing to do if you want to kill transparency is do a congressional investigation. What a waste of time. We don't need a congressional investigation. We need answers. And there's a very simple question that the head of the Secret Service needs to answer. Why was that building not covered by the Secret Service? It's very close to Donald Trump. What happened? I would actually feel better, Jordan, if they just told me that there was a human failure or incompetence and someone's been fired. But right now, by the head of Secret Service just briefing Congress and not coming clean, I find that very troubling. This was a public event. A member of the public was killed. The public is panicking and in fear of what's happening. The public needs to be briefed. What is happening? Answer a very simple question. The head of the Secret Service just needs to answer. Why wasn't that building covered? We don't need a year-long congressional investigation to answer that question. We need her to come forward and tell us the answer.
Yeah, and some people need to pay for the consequences of that if it was a misstep, like you said, Rick, and if it was a personnel error, because at that point, I mean, that's just in our country for whoever the president or former president is when they are out and campaigning as the nominee for one of the two major parties in the country, and you've got people like Congressman Benny Johnson wanted to strip the Secret Service away from President Trump. I mean, we saw some of the horrific language used from congressional staffers. Most of them have lost their jobs. But I wanted to take it back here to Milwaukee as well. We know that President Trump is rewriting his remarks, but he also decided, Rick, and I thought this was important, that instead of making major changes to kind of how the convention would move, that he would still come into Milwaukee, like the candidates do, kind of 4 days before, maybe make a quick appearance on one of these first 2 nights at the convention, and then go about bring some normalcy to what is the biggest moment for his party to be able to put their case out to the American people.
One of the things that I love about President Trump is that he really feels the moment. He's somebody who understands how to, say, adjust tariffs if we're getting beat and it's not working, or engage a country that we haven't engaged, that we've had under sanctions. He adjusts the policy. He adjusts his actions according to what is happening on the ground. That is a real leader. And he's doing that with his convention time. He wants to be here. He knows people want to see him. They know that he knows that people need to feel like there's a sense of normalcy. And it's got to be incredibly hard for he and Melania, but they're doing it.
You know, Rick, also, we will see you tomorrow. We're doing a panel together for the Kansas GOP here on lawfare with the ACLJ team. And, you know, I think just, Rick, finally, you know, this idea, a lot of people have called in, though, and said the lawsuits, the legal challenges, the criminalization of being a politician and the issues that you face, we see both at the federal and state level. And then you add the media to that. And then it's people, like you said, Rick, kind of said, well, what did you expect would eventually happen?
Yeah, look, I think it's a natural extension of all of this. We've got to be able to have dissenting voices, got to be able to listen to other people and respond calmly. We should not be resorting to violence. I think that what Donald Trump is going to do is recognize the moment, try to unite all of us. It's clear that God saved him. I think there's no question about that God has a plan for Donald Trump, and his time on earth is not done.
No, I mean, just the way he turned his head, as you know, Rick, that's very rare. You know, the way that he speaks to the crowd and things like that. I mean, like moments and moments, and you go back and think, you know, I mean, we're talking about inches. I've heard these experts on saying most people in 5 minutes could have learned how to make that shot. I mean, I don't want to go through too much, but just the impact it is on the country. It's had a serious impact on the country. I think, you know, President Trump can also bring us back to some, he's funny. He's got humor as well as part of this. Which is all important at these conventions. Rick, I will see you tomorrow with the ACLJ team. We're all in Milwaukee today. And folks, support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. We've got our matching challenge right now. Double the impact of your donations. How we've got Rick on the team. He's speaking Wednesday night at the convention in prime time. Go to aclj.org and donate today.
Tweet that went out, or an X post, if you will, however you still want to say it, that was pretty wild to look at.
From an independent journalist on Twitter that fights for members of our armed services is his kind of cause of action that he takes. But he posted, and we can put it up on the screen, it's an image from some sort of briefing at Fort Liberty, which used to be Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And this was an anti-terrorism briefing, basically a slideshow, a presentation. At the top it says terrorist groups. And so they're obviously going through a anti-terrorism briefing. And before this slide, it was about ISIS, about Middle Eastern terror. And this one is anti-abortion. And they put in parentheses, right to life and Operation Rescue. And around it are the symbols of Operation Rescue, the National Right to Life, and the New York license plate you can purchase that says Choose Life.
Yeah, you've seen those in most states, the little Choose Life license plate. Again, Will said Operation Rescue, and then National Right to Life. This is being presented at Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg. That is what's happening to pro-lifers.
The DOD is doing this. And what is crazy is, and we all discussed this here this morning when we saw it, sadly, we're not shocked. The first thing, yes, we have it up on the screen now.
If you're watching right now, you are seeing this image. This is a picture that someone took in the audience of this presentation at Fort Liberty, where you see it clearly says terrorist groups and then lists Operation Rescue, National Right to Life. And again, that license plate. And of course, it tells you all the things that they do, including, you know, demonstrations and protests, mass demonstrations, so 2 back to back. There's a lot of those things, picketing.
From the time that Biden stepped into office, that he has been targeting pro-life conservative groups from requiring reports to be made through the FBI and now the Department of Defense.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We got some phone lines open. Look, since we are only what's likely to be within a few hours of finding out who the vice presidential candidate will be for the Republican Party, I want to know who you want it to be or who you think it's going to be. Give us a call right now, 1-800-684-3110. We're going to be off the air in only about 10 minutes. You got to give us a call, 1-800-684-3110. The three that are being run with this morning, J.D. Vance seems like is leading that pack. Marco Rubio is another one, and Doug Burgum. Those are the three that we're kind of seeing as the potential candidates, but I want to hear from you. Who do you want it to be, and who do you think it's going to be? That could be even two different questions. Who would you have preferred it to be if it's going to be one of those three options? Give us a call, 1-800-684-3110. Give your quick thoughts to our phone screener so they can move on and get to more calls. But let's go ahead and kick things off with a call about that, horrifying assassination attempt that happened of President Trump over the weekend. Warren, you're listening in Idaho on line 2. You're on the air.
Thanks, guys, for taking my call. Quick thing, I encourage anybody that's not a champion, become a champion.
Thank you.
The ACLJ is fighting. But I'm going to say, as far as me and a lot of people I've talked to, I hold the mainstream media very much accountable for that with their hateful rhetoric, calling us and him Hitler, and we are the enemy. What do they think is going to happen? These psychos go out there and take it literally.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is the culmination of now 8+ years of these attacks on Donald Trump and Logan, those who support Donald Trump. So the point was, I remember 4 years ago, I always would say to people, listen, if you really support a candidate, what are things you can do? You can't be afraid to talk to your friends and family about why you support them. You can't be afraid to put the yard sign up or the bumper sticker. Can I tell people that right now, honestly and seriously? No. That's sad. I want to get to a point before November where I feel like I can tell them it's okay to do that in your neighborhood and that you should be proud of who you're supporting. But right now, I think we live in a place where there's when you see an event like this happen and occur, mentally, it'd be kind of tough to say, okay, I know people have done it as kind of a sign of protest. And maybe that's easier in some places in the country versus others. But the idea here that when you demonize someone to the almost, I mean, what's the step above Hitler? I mean, Satan himself. So you're talking about the most evil people that exist in our lives, or in history. And when you demonize someone to that point, as a demon, you get to people who are again, don't just see it as rhetoric and Logan, think they are taking some action which is protecting people.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that you see that. I mean, you have a lot of people over the weekend kind of showing their support or even kind of backing off their support. But look, Will and I were in downtown Nashville last night. We encountered a Nazi protest. And I'm not talking about, when you put Nazi in quotes like they associate with, Trump supporters, whatever it be. We're talking about swastika flying Nazis. And on the streets of downtown Nashville, it did not feel like a fake demonstration. It felt very real. And for a moment, you're like, I can't even believe what I'm seeing. You can't believe what you're seeing on the streets right now. Whether that is on any sort of political side or on an extremist side, where police are having to surround these. You would say it wasn't a protest; it was a demonstration.
Right.
It's a weird time. Those are Nazis. That's what's happening right now. Let's go ahead and take some phone calls. A lot of you have your thoughts. Some of them I agree with. Some of them I'm not so sure. Let's go to Melissa in South Carolina up first. You're on the air.
Hi. I think it's going to be J.D. Vance just because I follow Donald Trump Jr., and that's my guess for who the VP pick is.
Yeah, Melissa, I think J.D. Vance is probably number one in the lead right now. There's a lot of reports right now that he is maybe even on the way to the RNC as we speak in a bit more of a formal style. So we'll see what happens. Jordan, thoughts?
Yeah, I think right now I'm getting a lot of text about J.D. Vance, some that say that they're 100%. No one's ever 100% until it happens, but those movements you can't always deny as well. And I know some people might not understand what we're talking about. We're talking about how much security they have, how they're entering, if they've already been notified to the Secret Service and things like that. So again, eventually it kind of gets out before it's even out. But you can always be surprised. I mean, he's also a U.S. senator after there's been a shooting, so having extra security because they know he's in the VP mix is not also outside the line, and that there could be another name if we doesn't look like we're going to get that before we're off the air today. Let's go to next. You want to go to Teresa, Oklahoma?
Teresa in Ohio. Ohio, you're on the air,
Ohio.
Teresa.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much. This is a wild card for sure, but someone who has a lot of intelligence background and really does his research, it's a wild card. Elon Musk.
Well, look, Elon came out, fully supported President Trump.
He officially
Elon,
endorsed, 100%.
Not born in America.
Right.
So that's a problem, right, Jordan?
And again, so unlikely that he is going to be the choice. Doesn't mean he couldn't be part of a cabinet potentially. I mean, or I don't think he's going to be giving up his companies that he's working on right now in new technologies. But what he could be is kind of like what Peter Thiel did the first time go around with President Trump, which is be a top kind of outside advisor when it comes to the tech economy world. And of course, when it comes to getting to space and all of that.
Yeah, you even saw Jeff Bezos come out and sort of semi-support President Trump over the weekend, which is pretty wild as well.
Washington Post that as well. Yeah. I mean, that he owns. Hey guys, stop making up headlines like he fell on stage. Yeah. I mean, that was also absurd that CNN put up headlines like that, Washington Post. I know that they acted like, oh, well, they didn't know what was happening in the moment. Everyone heard the gunshots. He didn't fall on stage. He went to the ground like you're told to do after he was shot. And then they tried to take away, how shot was he? Maybe it was just a piece of a teleprompter that ended up not being the case. I mean, the fact that they were even trying to lower the threshold on what he could claim happened to him, as if that's what people really cared about.
All right, let's continue on. Let's go to Andrew in Florida, line 1. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yep.
I think it should be Tucker Carlson because we don't need any more. We don't need any more politicians. We need people that have a love for this country and a love for the people.
All right, Andrew. Look, that was conversation early on that it could be Tucker. I don't think it will be, but you know what? Good to hear your thoughts. Let's try to keep going and get a couple more. Susan's calling line 5. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hey, go ahead.
Yes, I like Dr. Ben Carson. It's my choice. I think he served in the administration. He's loyal. He's not really a politician. He was served in the capacity of the HUD secretary, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, I hate to cut you off, Susan. We're running out of time.
Interesting for Susan, as people try to read the tea leaves and everything. President Trump followed Ben Carson on Truth Social yesterday, but doesn't follow any of the other VP hopefuls. So there were some people like, could that be a sign? I don't believe that it's him, but you do never know.
I love Dr. Carson. I would be totally in support if that was the case. Let's go to Michelle. Last call of the day very quickly. Michelle in Virginia, go ahead.
Okay, I think Marco Rubio, because I don't think he'd bring in more points, and because to bring in, people already think he's prejudiced. I'm just going to say, but I love Trump. I just want you to know that.
Hey, Michelle,
think Marco Rubio.
I hate to cut you off. We are literally out of time. You said Marco Rubio over Vance. I understand that. A lot of people think he's definitely in the running in the top 3. So we'll see what happens. Probably there's a good chance that a lot of you listening right now already know because you're watching this later on in the podcast format. With that being said, that is going to do it for today's show. Join us all week as Jordan is live from the Republican National Convention and be a part of that conversation at aclj.org, where you can also make a donation right now during the Life and Liberty Drive, where all donations are doubled. That means if you give $20, it's going to become $40 and so on and so on. Go to aclj.org right now.